Hello, so today we're gonna be playing my Mega Man Maker level Freezerburn, and I'm gonna show you guys the design thinking that I put in when I was creating this level. So we start off with this little intro screen, and you're gonna see why it's called Freezerburn in a second. So Freezerburn, we start off in this Super Metroid-esque corridor. And right away you can see that on the top there's ice and on the bottom there's fire. So that combined with the music sets up the game feel of the level. So you can head either way here, but most players, probably instinctively head right first. So let's head right. And right away you come in this room with a lot of strange objects, but you can't seem to interact with them in any way. So this kind of sets up a goal that the player can work towards into, figuring out what all these strange flashing objects do. So once they figure out that they can't really do much in here, they'll probably head back. And you can see there's some interesting stuff going on in this room too that they'll figure out about later. So they come into this room, and right away they can see there's some fire, ladders, some sort of hallway going on down below. They can try to head left to use the fire to hop onto that ledge, but it probably won't work out for them. Well, it definitely won't work out for them. So hopefully the player will figure out that, right is to head into the right room, left is to enter the left room, and up will take them into the up room. So in this room, they're given some health and energy, so to make sure that they're all rested up for the next section. And it also introduces them to ice mechanics. So the ice mechanics are completely by themselves in here. There's no way that the player can get hurt right now. And they can also see that there's some interesting enemies going on up above. So heading into the next room, the first enemy is introduced. And this guy's pretty easy. He's introduced in isolation. And then when the player heads up, they'll have to do some tricky jumps on the ice. So they'll have some room to practice here, and it shouldn't be too dangerous for them. So this room kind of forces them to get the hang of the jumping mechanics, and it shouldn't be too tough either. So once they get the hang of that, you come to this room. And in this room, you're actually in the perfect place to dodge the Seal's attacks. And of course, he gives a pretty large warning that he's going to attack as well. And you can survive quite a few of his attacks as well. And it also introduces the player to these icicles. So that will give them a hint of what they're gonna see later on in the level. So now the player's gonna test their jumping skills, but even if they don't, they can also get an introduction to this enemy, and it's not too dangerous down here. It's not sudden death or anything. It's just a simple enemy that they can pretty easily kill, and they'll get, even if they don't fall down there, they'll get a look at that enemy's patterns and behavior in complete isolation, so that they won't have to, be surprised when they encounter it later. Go up the ladder, they come at a checkpoint. So in this room there's two enemies, but in the place that the player starts out at, neither one can really hurt them in any way. In fact, only one of these enemies can actually hurt the player at all. And this one is just a little fan enemy that blows them. So they should be able to get used to the behaviors of these two enemies. And I give them a lot of safe spots so that they can avoid this snowball shooting enemy's attacks. So let's stay safe right here. Wait for it to attack. Jump. And then the player can kind of just go ham on it. And now there's some strange blocks here, and they're down here as well. So the player will jump on them, nothing happens. They jump off, and the block goes up. So that kind of lets the player know what this block's behavior is. And they also get a view of the penguins before they have to, encounter them. And if they fail like I did there, they can always just go down and recharge. And then they can go up here. They're starting to get a little more tested on their jumping skills now. And if they die like I did there, they get respawned right in the same room. So it shouldn't be too frustrating. Alright, let's hurry. So yeah, now the difficulty is starting to ramp up a little bit, but it still shouldn't be too hard, as you get respawned basically right where you die, so... yeah, these jumps can be a little tricky, but at the end of it, you get rewarded with some health, and trust me, you're not too far from the next checkpoint. So in this room, there's some interesting stuff going on. You're starting to get tested on the enemies that you've already seen. And with this specific part, the best timing to go is probably right after they're done shooting sideways. So let's try and... oop. Not too bad if you get hit. And this guy doesn't really pose too much of a threat, but you're getting a couple more enemies thrown at you now. And now it's time for basically the ultimate platforming challenge in this level. Very tiny spaces. But if you can make it through, you get rewarded with a checkpoint and a beautiful view. So now you're outside. So the theming of the ice part of the level is of course ice, but it's also the enemy focused part of the level. And the theme is also going upwards. So there's kind of a lot of dualities in this level. And so now you're getting tested on your jumping skills with the added, with the addition of the fan guys who can kind of, mess you up a little bit, but you should be prepared for it. This part's not really too hard, but it is throwing some interesting combinations at the player that they probably haven't seen before. So now you keep climbing up the mountain, and it's just a lot of traps that you've seen before and should know how to handle. And if not, you can probably just power through them to get the health up here. And you're rewarded with a power-up. So the player should discover what this power does just by accident, really. Because these enemies will keep respawning, and you'll probably try to attack them, and you'll figure out that the fire gets frozen by this power. So that allows you to head up here, and this section can really hammer in exactly how powerful this weapon is. So it's very useful. And then your only choice is to go down. Whoa! And I don't know, that fall, it kind of symbolizes how far you've come as a player, as you get to see all of the different rooms that you've traversed. Head this way, there's not much else to do. And of course, like you saw there, I got rewarded with the energy. And you can try interacting with this, but there's still not really anything you can do here. But the player will probably remember in the beginning there were those strange fire bars. So, well, now we know the fire bars can be freezed and walked on, right? So let's try doing exactly that. not quite perfect, but you're still rewarded with a checkpoint and some more health and energy. And now you're introduced to these sideways fire bars, which you gotta time right, but it's not too punishing as the checkpoint is right there. And then in the safe environment, you're also introduced to these springs. You fall right on the spring, and it's introduced to you accidentally in isolation. And then in the next room, you can see there are some spikes. Well, the player will probably jump over them, but even if they don't, you know, it's introduced in isolation. It's insta-kill, sadly, but even if you die, you respawn basically right in the same place. So it's not too big of a shock, really. So as you can see, most everything is introduced in isolation. Well, really everything is introduced in isolation. And the deaths don't tend to be too punishing. So let's head on to the next section. So the top part is themed after ice, going upwards, and enemies, whereas this bottom part here is mainly about going downwards, fire, and obstacles. So you can see here, a nice trick that you can do here is just spam the button and they get frozen right as they come out. So you saw right there I went on a conveyor belt, so that introduces the conveyor belt sort of in isolation. And you can see here now there's this thing, sort of a swinging chain. So it's completely optional. There's some rewards over there. Here, I'll try to run and get it. That's okay. And there's not really much of a punishment even if you get hit. So the player can kind of discover the behavior and the actions of this chain thing before they really have to encounter it later on. So in this room, you can see I'm kind of throwing some of the things that we've already seen at them. But it's really not too punishing. If you fall down, you know, you can, of course you want to jump there, but if you fall down, you just land on these little springs. And the player will probably be jumping to try to get back up, and so they might discover that if you jump on the springs, they will launch you even higher. So it might actually be beneficial to them to, you know, accidentally fall down there. So that's introduced nicely to them in isolation. They don't gotta touch anything here. And then you can see now I'm throwing the insta-kill spikes at them a little bit more. But it still shouldn't be too hard. You just gotta press a direction and they'll be fine. And they get rewarded with the checkpoint if they can make it through. So downwards to the next section. And stuff really gets crazy here. But if they try to use their gun, they'll find out, which, you know, they might try, since there's so many enemies around here. They'll find out they can actually freeze the magma. And I mean, they might also try that knowing that they can freeze the fire as well. So now I'm really testing them on their skills with everything that they've seen so far. And yeah, it's pretty intense, but it's definitely not undoable. Oh no. But that's fine. It's pretty quick to get right back here. You just start here, and you can fall down. And it's not too bad at all. And they're also rewarded with an energy at the end of each section. So there's no real need to worry too much. It's really quick to get back, actually. So you can see I'm really throwing some stuff at them. Perfectly possible to do all this without getting hit, but I mean, it's fine to get hit as well. Nothing much will happen to you. And oh boy, so yeah, see here, I wasn't quick enough. But let's try that again. Let's try that again. The player needs to kind of focus a little bit on this part, since since it's pretty crazy, but it shouldn't be too hard. It's perfectly doable. But I mean, this is the, you know, most exciting segment of the level. So yeah, it's gotta be intense. here. Freeze that. Go back up. Alright, let's quickly run. And you can see. And you know, it's perfectly possible I've done all these parts without getting damaged. Yeah. Oh no, I keep on falling down. But yeah, at the end of that exciting segment, they get rewarded with some energy and health. And finally climbing up all the way back to the ice segment, once again showcasing how far they've come as a player. And they're rewarded with a checkpoint and unlimited health and energy, so that they'll be fully prepared for the boss fight, which is behind those doors. So now at this point the player should feel pretty accomplished. I mean, they just, you know, almost completed an entire level, and finally they're at that end goal that they were looking at since the very beginning. So let's head through the boss door. Once again, the boss room keeps with the theme of fire versus ice, and you know, upwards versus downwards movement, etc, etc. So the boss is fire themed, and in this case the players themselves is sort of an ice themed character. But yeah, the boss shouldn't be too tough, but it's also not too easy either. So kind of keeps the player on their toes, and they should be able to complete a level. So that was my Mega Man Maker level, which I created, and you can see how I use the principles of isolation, gradually increasing in difficulty until, you know, an epic, satisfying conclusion. So thanks for watching, and that's about it. Check out the level in the description below.